Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well on this fantastic, funky, flippin', freaking, funky Friday. That's it, baby. It's Friday. We made it through the week again, and you're looking absolutely amazing today. I must add, you must have had a good week. We're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, but before we do anything, a little bit of housekeeping. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and like the video, because by the time you get balls deep into this video, you're going to forget. You're going to forget, so get it done. Get it out of the way. Go on, do it now. That's it. So, we are going to, in a second, going to be going through some communication I had between myself and Eddie yesterday, because Eddie saw my video on the 911 call. And really, we're going back to when I believe that the lies began, when the lies start. And I think Eddie also is sort of alluding to the fact that, yeah, this seems to be when the lies in this case all started. You know, when you see a room where you've got the prosecutor, Bad Santa, you've literally got James Fry as well. And who's standing in the background? None other than Scott Green as well. You've got the three amigos, or the three musketeers, whichever one suits them best. I don't know. Huey, Dewey, and Louie. See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. But so we're going to be going over that in a second. But I just want to say, yesterday, video 3, the AITA, am I the asshole? I postponed it. So that's going to be coming out later on today. So I do say it's Thursday in that video. It's not Thursday, it's Friday. But it's because it's late. So I'm not mental. I do know what day it is. I always know what day it is. But anyway, let's get straight into this, because this is, again, we're going to be going back, and I'm just going to be touching on something regarding this 911 call one last time, because it's like everything, isn't it? You do a video and there's a little bit of backlash, and I still think people are ignoring the point, the whole issue with that call. But let's touch on this, right? Now, these notes are on the screen really for my benefit, not yours, so I can actually see. So the first press release, this was an isolated and targeted attack. Nothing for the public to be concerned about. Does this sound like a mass murderer on the loose? Or does it seem that the attack was contained, which began and ended in the house? I believe it's the latter. Now, I know what people are going to say here. They're going to turn around and say that is likely, and I believed that early on, that was potentially a knee-jerk reaction from law enforcement to try and calm the situation down, to say, look, it's targeted, there's nothing to worry about. But when you consider the knowledge that they would have already had, because it was literally mentioned on, apparently it was mentioned on the 911 call, well, we heard some audio, suggesting that there was a lone masked intruder entering into a property to do this crime. Do you know what I mean? You would think that they would likely be on high alert. If this was indeed a masked killer, and in the situation that we're kind of led to believe that this happened in, as per the call, that they would be a lot more cautious. They would be a lot more cautious. But their initial response was, this is isolated, targeted, nothing to worry about, it's all under control. The header above relates to, we've heard no call was made until noon. I see you fallen into the trap, because no one knows if a call or calls were made during or just after the attack. Just as no one knows if the alarm was green or even driving around during the early morning hours on November 13th. Now, let's just touch on this, what we're saying about this call and the timing. Let's not forget, in this call, it literally states that it is something is happening. That is literally stated in the call. Something is happening. Something's happening in our house. We hear that Hunter apparently goes to the kitchen to get a weapon. He goes to the kitchen to get a weapon. So I revert back to what was the domino that knocked over to trigger the call. Now, there's so many people, and they will come forward and they'll say, well, they didn't know what happened. Why are you questioning it? Why is this important? And I will come back and I'll argue and say, hold on a second. We're literally saying in the court documentation that someone walks past, Dylan Mortensen walks past and sees Anna Knodel on the floor. And then 8 hours goes by. 8 hours goes by. We've got an open front door. We've got other people being called to the property. We've got Steve Goncalves going out into the public and saying that Xana's door was shut. Hunter had to come over to try and get the door open. And then they called 911 because almost as if we don't know what's happening because the door's shut. We're trying to get attention and we've got to call 911. But with that door open, it removes that barricade between not knowing and knowing, because you do know, because you can see Xana laying on the floor in the doorway. The question then becomes, why didn't you approach Xana for 8 hours if you only thought that she was passed out drunk? And you literally state in the call, she's not waking up. She's passed out. She's not waking up. So how in the blue fuck do you know that she's not waking up? Are you telling me that everybody in that house, with the belief that this is just alcohol, that nobody even thinks to walk over to her? And if they've walked over to her, then they are absolutely going to know that she is deceased. We have literally been told about the injuries that she sustained. We've been told about the fact that Ethan is also just feet away from her and he is also deceased. There would be blood everywhere. We also are told that the killer sat down in a chair, so there is a chair in there with blood over the chair as well. So that's the problem that I have with the 911 call. But like Eddie alludes to here, we don't know exactly when that call truly took place, especially when you consider that by their own admissions in that call, something is happening. Something is happening here, and we also hear that Hunter goes and gets a weapon. Why would he go and get a weapon if someone is simply passed out drunk and they're not waking up? And again, if you're trying to wake them up, how are you doing that? What, through a fucking, I don't know, a spirit box? You're going to see someone who's been deceased for 8 hours and know that they're not any longer with us, especially with the scene around them. I ain't fucking buying it that they didn't know what was going on before the call. The issue is, when did that call actually truly happen? But let's go back into Eddie's notes. You may recall I added 84 contacts to various parties until noon. Wonderful, because human nature forces us to understand it's highly likely one of those contacts would have stated call 911 long before noon. I personally believe a call was made during or just after the attack. According to the released transcripts of Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk's phone, which we know they were present and in the house while the attack had transpired. So if we understand they were present, all the contacts were made after the police were called to the house. It's the only thing that makes sense. We know of 84 contacts that we are aware of at this time. What Eddie is basically saying here is, if you look at all of the people who were communicated with via court transcripts, there is a lot of people there. There's a lot of people who are being contacted in various ways, shapes, and forms. Plus, don't forget that early on, we had the likes of Dot, WSU Kim, which a lot of people boo-pooed right at the beginning. But as time has progressed, their stories seem to be incredibly accurate now. So a load of people are being reached out to. We're hearing that Snapchat, we're hearing that numerous people were contacted. And are we saying, what is that conversation looking like? Again, let me know down below. What do you think that conversation is going like? If the conversation external to the house is the same as the conversation, the communication between Dylan Morton and Bethany Funk early on, then you can only believe that one person, somebody, somewhere, would say call 911. So, like Eddie says, it only makes sense that the 911 call happened much earlier, because to wait 8 hours doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. In this context, from what we can see in the court documentation, that length of time between the crime happening and the call, it doesn't make sense. And it certainly doesn't make sense when you factor in Xana Kanodel's now open door and one of the surviving roommates actually seeing her laying in the doorway. Doesn't make sense. We've got another bit here, which I'm going to read it, and I want you to tell me what you think. Did you watch the Drunk Bird show with Steve Goncalves about 3 weeks ago? SG stated he sat down with FBI agents and thought he could have the job of having the charges dropped on Kaylee and picked up at the federal level. Steve Goncalves pointed out Kaylee's charges would have been more expensive at the federal level. He then says it means Kaylee doesn't ever have to go to court for her. There's then a pause. I would have been fine with that. He never discloses to Drunk Bird what the charges entailed. This may be the reason Kaylee was at Steve Goncalves' house the 3 weeks before the attack. Steve Goncalves also stated Kaylee was dating someone else. Then she ends up deceased with 3 others. We asked why Dylan Mortensen invited Kaylee rather than Maddie back to Moscow. So why was it Dylan Mortensen who requested that Kaylee go back to Moscow, Idaho, rather than Maddie asking her to go back? This little detail here is also something that makes you raise a bushy eyebrow. Is that right? Are my eyebrows bushy? I don't know. Take me about 3 or 4 interviews before I conclude. An isolated targeted attack, nothing for the public to worry about, tells me they weren't looking for a sole mass murderer. But the info they gathered early on was this was isolated, which began and ended within the house. There was a man in the house last night. Yeah, there were several men in the house. So let's not be fooled by the alleged next-door neighbour's statements to dispatch, specifically designed with a sole masked intruder as the lone sole attacker. The 911 call was staged by prosecution and the state directed at Koberger, who was not found near the house to commit the murders. But we know who was in the house, as does Moscow Police Department, ISP, and the state and prosecution. 23rd request for discovery. Where are the 2 search warrant returns for Koberger's phone extraction data? Because we know investigators in the PCA determined Koberger was the driver of the 2015 white Elantra and he had possession of his phone. If we turn over the phone data, we are found with our pants down. Their pants were down before the arrest, as admitted again in their filed, tweaked, irrelevant PCA, which, as I said, is very relevant because the defendant was charged with murder, yet in another location. And let's not forget that we have a cell phone specialist, Cy Ray, and however much the guilters want to turn around and say Cy Ray's information is irrelevant, or the judge wants to say he's a conspiracy theorist, this is a guy who has been involved in the prosecution of many criminals. He is a guy whose technology is still used to this day. He is a guy who, for some reason, just decides to work pro bono for somebody who everybody wants to, well, not everybody, but the vast majority of people wants to believe is a mass killer. So why would Cy Ray, this specialist in this kind of technology, come forward pro bono and put his entire reputation on the line to help this guy? Why would he call out in such a brutal fashion the prosecution if there is no basis, no foundation for his claims? And if there is foundation and basis for his claims, then that should absolutely be looked into, especially when we do have 2 warrants that have seemingly fucking vanished into thin air that just so could prove that Brian Koberger was not near this property, especially when every attempt to place him at this property seems to come from either leaks that go to media or Steve Goncalves, who himself seems to have just been weaponized by the state because he kept coming out into the public arena. Do you know, it's bizarre to me. He was attacked. He was caught on a tower that provides coverage to within 100 meters of that property. His car is on camera, yet you look at every single piece of footage, and I've said this previously, you cannot tell what car that is on that footage, let alone whose fucking car it is on that footage. Yes, if you put a load of circumstantial evidence together, and eventually the needle moves and the scale drops. But when you look at each of these on their individual merit and truly dig deep into them, you then discover that this isn't the build-up of a vast amount of strong circumstantial evidence. It's actually a load of circumstantial evidence that is weak as piss. And that is just my opinion, which opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one. And again, I must remember your Am I an Arsehole video coming later today. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done that already, you should have done. I paused and everything. Give you time to do it. I'll do it again. Do it. But anyway, look, what I'm getting at is there are so many questions around this case. The 911 call, the fact that in the 911 call, they're literally saying something's happening. Hunter goes to get a weapon. They want us to believe that they thought Xana was just simply passed out, but they can literally see her in the doorway, but they don't get close enough to see what's actually going on.
Xana! Oh, she's not waking up. Call 911.
Or the fact that they called Hunter and his missus to get them over to help them open a door that's already open. Why didn't they just go upstairs to Kaylee and Maddie? They already had help in the house. Why even go external when you've got then 4 of you? I'm sure 4 of you could have opened a door that's already opened. Make it make sense. Love you all. Mwah.